I started making art when I was about 5 years old, and I started taking classes when I was 11. And I've just pretty much been on this journey of making art since I was very small. I grew up here in Bellevue, Washington. I left to go to art school in Pasadena, California. So I would have been around 21 then. I became an illustrator. And with that education, I went by myself with my cat to New York City to be a freelance illustrator. And that's what I did for about 13 years. So I worked as a children's book illustrator. So I told stories. I learned to tell stories through pictures. I worked for like the New York Times and magazines, mostly telling stories through reading articles, catching the viewer's attention. So it was really about communication, how to express something, draw somebody in, and then move to reading. And after I did that, I got married, moved back to Seattle. And from that, I transitioned into making fine art. And that would have been in 2000. And that was a huge change. Being an illustrator was also terrifying. I would say when I got out of art school, great art school, I was about I'm just going to say a B student, a C student. I wasn't the star students. And in fact, this is kind of a funny story. When I got my final, report card, I never looked at it because I didn't want to see a C. And then, you know what I mean? Like head to New York City with a C in my brain. It's like the land of perfection, right? So yeah, I went there and I was very much kind of average, in terms of, average, like was working at it. A lot of the jobs didn't turn out very well, but because I was so friendly and nice, they give me another chance because there's a lot of relationship building in New York City. It was connections, and people talking about, this person, that person. So I literally cold called, which is frightening, for like 5 years, 6 years. Every day I got up to do it. So even though I think about how you can come out of a school and feel like, oh, you're just kind of in the middle of the pack, hard work, just making that phone call, even though the illustration might be pretty good, was fantastic. It was like, yes, I made the phone call, and I just slowly moved along. Yes, I spent every day working, even until midnight, talking on the phone back when we had phones like this, with my girlfriends who are also illustrators. So we just spent our time going to cafes. I know, which sounds really lovely, but life was kind of like that. And then dropping off our portfolios, because in the old days, no computers. You literally had a black portfolio and you dropped it off like it's Simon and Schuster, and they would look at it overnight, and then you'd pick it up the next day. And I did that all over the city for years. Just drop it. So I love my time in New York. And then my big breakthrough came when I got a children's book. And that was another thing. I love to tell people how I had no idea how to illustrate a children's book. I didn't have a class in it in art school. I didn't even know I could tell a story. It was about a cow, but I did. And, I love it because it's like step by step by step by step in the, page by page, which I still use in my life today. We'll get there. And it turns out I was really good at doing children's stories. So I love how you kind of just keep at it and something did reveal itself. And that was children's books. And after that, people were calling me instead of me always calling them, because it was reviewed in the New York Times. I didn't really know that teaching would be my direction or something I loved until, I would say, within the last 7 years. What happened was I had major trauma in my life, that a complex trauma, they would call it, that went on for about 12 years, which my husband became paralyzed overnight. Then he had a stroke a couple years later. Then he got brain cancer. tumor removed, and then he had bone growing in his tissue. I can just go on beyond what most people feel like they could handle or ever was prepared to live through. So it's really a day-to-day survival. With that, it changed me. I've become more resilient, still vulnerable, very compassionate, and sort of fearless. And with that, I realized how much I love now connecting with a community, and that community turned out to be art classes, Path with Art. And what's amazing is that I just didn't know that it would be my calling. I found out about Path with Art through a friend who was working here, also an illustrator, not an illustrator, artist. And she sort of brought me in and introduced me to people. And when they brought me on board, I was scared. I really didn't know what to expect. I'll be really honest. Maybe terrified. Like maybe how some of my people in my class felt. The same. I needed support from them in ways, from them just showing up is a form of support, and me showing up for them. So now I've been teaching each year different classes because I have a really kind of wide skill set: painting, mixed media, collage, some writing. So I can really bring to Path with Art a variety of projects for a variety of groups. It was a little intimidating being with people who are in assisted housing, and so that was awkward because of it being so unfamiliar. I wasn't judgmental or critical, just uneasy. But that went away with time. But I think that's a pretty normal reaction. And I just note it. And I'm like, I wonder, I'll probably get more used to this. And once I got to know my students, that all kind of goes away. But then it's always in the back of my mind, they have some serious issues, struggles, challenges that we're not going to really dive into, like we're not in therapy. But there's all those things happening while I'm working up with the art project and explaining it to them. So it's I love it because I love kind of multitasking, and I sort of feel like you have to do that, especially when people have other things going on in their lives. Some of my students told me for the first time I would hear, I'm depressed. This is a hard day for me. They may say it like that. So I just listen and acknowledge, and I'm comfortable. I think when people have had trauma, they notice everything. I think they notice if someone's uncomfortable. They notice if you back up, they notice all of that. So I always make sure, but it comes natural to me to just say, you let me know what you need. If you don't need me coming over to you, that's fine. So I just have a feel for, body language, just awareness, and I really like people. I really enjoy being with people, even with people in my classes that may not look like they're maybe loving being there with me. You never know what's going on with people. And I've also learned that. You never know. Some of the quietest people they're completely engaged, connecting with each person individually. And because I'm a hands-on teacher, that's where I thrive. I didn't even know I was, by the way, I didn't know I was a hands-on teacher until I read about it. I go, oh, there's a name for me. I sit down with people carefully, if they allow that. And then if they get stuck, I sit down and help them relax and trust the artistic process. And if they're having a hard day, or they're saying they're having a good day, or they're just stuck. I'm stuck. I don't know what to do. And it's like, let's talk. I know what we can do. Don't worry. I'm there for you. Sometimes that's all you need to kind of kickstart, get them going again. But I always say, I'm on it. I'm watching you, and we're going to get there. and having that sort of overwhelming support and encouragement, and that I really would love to see them succeed in whatever way that is for them. It generally happens. It generally works. So I've gotten feedback where teaching that helped me to want to keep teaching is when I hear, "You're so easy to talk to." And we're just talking about the weather, really, but it's obviously more profound than that. Sometimes they will say, "I've been drinking, I had a hard night," and I just say, "I hear you. I'm so glad you're here." And that's enough to really make a huge effect in somebody's day. So you can never discount these interactions, no matter how short they are. So I think the stability that I've developed later on in life, and from the trauma I've had, I think comes from just being deeply empathetic and having deep sadness myself, and frightened, scared, not having any control. That feeling of having no control, because really you don't. It's not like I feel like I don't. There isn't. I still can't quite put my finger on it, but I think it's just allowed me to wade right into the water with them in a way, and respecting boundaries though. And if they just kind of ready for where people are at, meeting them where they're at, and then sensing if they need a little bit of help, always checking in with that. So I kind of started with that, which is interesting. I go to that first, but I'm teaching complicated skills at, painting and collage, and some people have no experience making art before. One of my students had quadriplegia, and she had assistance with breathing, and she had an assistant with her. She used her mouth to paint. So I didn't know I would have that. She would be in my class. So I'm like, okay, how am I going to work with her, talk with her? So I would show them the project, and I make sure that I'm really organized, very organized with my work, knowing what I'm going to teach day by day. And then with the packets with Zoom, they made sure that each was marked one, so they could see where they're going step by step. Because that was I think what's scary is they don't know where they're going, because each part of the project is challenging. So there's they have to have some faith that they're on a journey with me. Some of my work involves tearing up paintings. I don't know if you know that. They're creating paintings and tearing them up. But the metaphor for that is pretty powerful, putting them together in a new way to create a new scene, which a lot of them felt like themselves. So, and I use that in my own work. I break things, and I find beauty in broken and torn things. And to me, it's an opportunity to make something new and beautiful. And I bring that to my class. So I'm bringing to them what I do, like a lot of teaching artists. But I would say what's worked is the step by step by step. So since I'm teaching different mediums, I'm just always thinking about, how do they hear me? How do they hear my instruction? When I say pick up your brush and put your brush in the blue paint, really, what are they hearing? Do they know how to use the paintbrush? So I'm always thinking about what they're listening to, how they're taking it in, and watching for people who might be a little confused and they don't raise their hand. You have all kinds of people. So I would say showing them, sometimes adding a little thing on their artwork, look what happens when I do this. Just that. We're going to add this yellow piece of your other painting right here. And they're like, wow. So it can the whole idea of staying with it, working through frustration or negative feelings, all happens within the art process itself. So it's powerful in that way. And then as the piece develops, because you do want them to sort of like where they're at the time, and give them confidence that you are right where you should be. So much reassurance, and dealing with maybe the conflict they're feeling within themselves, and having a lot of support and organized that they're willing to trust me, and do what I'm asking them to do, or give it a try. Because I think in a way, when I read about what art therapists do, or what their goal is, or what the process is a lot like what I'm doing. There are definitely overlaps. I don't know if art therapists are talking about people's, diving down into issues in class with people. I think maybe I have more flexibility because I'm not sort of taking a project and saying this is going to be dealing with addiction, right? This is going to be dealing with housing, with being unhoused or insecure with housing, right? I think that might be part of it because I know I have a room full of all different kinds of people. And so at the projects I do, maybe broader than an art therapist does. So it's interesting. So yeah, I was breaking objects, like not out of anger, just like I've had it around and I think it's time for it to go. And then I would break some really nice things like a Venetian vase from my mom, and she lives here. And then I'd put it in artwork in a collage, and it'd be kind of this beautiful, wild, right here on the wall setting. And I would say to people, you get this reaction of like, how could you do that? It's all, like, oh my God. And I'm like, oh, wait. From their reactions, I thought, oh, I'm supposed to feel bad that it broke. And I'm like, no, I don't feel bad it broke because I get to see it in pieces. It's still there on my wall. Or a big half of the vase is there and it has a new place to live now instead of in a drawer, or I've had it for years. Like, it's nice. But I realize that's probably a different way for many people to think of objects as being permanent. There's a whole thing around objects being permanent. I think that reflects our lives in a lot of ways, letting things go. But it can be sad too. I mean, I'm not going to say you should break everything, but I had students saying just ripping up her painting was just amazing. And it felt like she was kind of putting herself back together. And she had told me she had suffered from extreme depression and she had kind of lost her career because of that. And this was like a rebirth for her during working this way. Like, it was like she'd never thought about taking something apart and then putting it back together and having something even more beautiful emerge. The art therapy part, I remember one woman said to me, I feel like my art has value for the first time. Now, does that mean it has something to do with her, I don't know if she was some of her issues, or no, did it just feel like her art had value for the first time? That was it. That's enough. That's amazing. Was it connected to depression or connected? You see what I mean? There wasn't this goal of trying, don't keep it open. So we can all find their little path. We don't all have to dig deep. Some of us do, right?